So buckle up. So imagine a vast, uncharted, stretching territory before us, but the year is not like 1845 or 49, but today, right? We see this territory that is not America, but is the landscape of artificial intelligence. It's exhilarating, filled with whispers of untold riches and transformative power, like Vinny was talking about. It's exhilarating. We are all here in this room because we are the first pioneers in this kind of AI frontier. So, let me change my hat. Go. So, like in any frontier, it's wild, unpredictable, and frankly a bit lawless. The rules are still being written, the maps are incomplete, and new discoveries and dangers emerge daily. So let's start off. Let me ask you a question to all of you. So who has already here implemented an MCP server? 1, 2, 3. Okay, the minority. And who here has been asked to implement an MCP server? Or the company wants to implement one? Oh, there you go. So we have people in the frontier here. Great. Then to create a bit of a common ground, for those who know and for those who don't know what MCP allows to do, MCP connects tools via a standardized API. So it's a protocol to connect basically a server and a client. It's a client-server architecture. And I'm not going to go deep into that. I think if you want to read about that, there's the documentation. But other things that it does, it maintains persistent sessions and it runs commands, maybe sometimes too freely, and it allows you to share context across workflows. So I'm going to be taking a high-level overview in terms of the technology and the strategy, rather than the inner workings of MCP. And yeah, MCP is constantly evolving, and you can read more about that in the official documentation. But okay, let's move on. So my core message today is simple, and it's very well in line with what Vinny said, is that we're just in the beginning of AI. We're merely in the trailhead, and MCP is a sign of progress, of course, in a way. So let's start with the perils of the open range, the bad. So on this early frontier, I think security feels like an untamed territory. A bit like this, like these doors. What's missing in these doors? Locks, right? Everybody can come in and out in this MCP saloon. And this, I think, is how MCP is working right now. There's already multiple security firms and researchers calling MCP a security nightmare. So let me show you. So one of these security firms recently came out with an aggregate of the security risks we have across MCP implementations. So we have remote code execution, which I'll talk a bit more in a bit. We have tool poisoning. We have the good old rug pull, also known as the supply chain problems, and also cross-server tool shadowing. So let's look at the first one called remote code execution in a bit more detail. And in this example, we can see it clearly. It's pretty simple actually, right? It's like you're just appending something at the end of the message, and if you append something evil, like escape and then a command, well, you're in, right? So you can pass any payload you want, and boom, you're in. So the security vendor called Equisly, here's some interesting statistics on this. So from all the vendors, all the tools and servers they checked, 43% have vulnerabilities. Of these 43%, 30% acknowledged and fixed the problems. 45% said they claim the security risks were theoretical or acceptable, meaning if you give a monkey a gun, well, it's not the monkey's fault. And also 25% did not respond to the security disclosures of this security company. In terms of security, I think this is actually pretty wild to see the numbers, but also the attitude of the responses were saying, yeah, what's the problem with having vulnerabilities? So it clearly shows that there is no maturity and that we are seeing the same repeating patterns. We put a lot of work in the past, also in cloud, to fix. It also makes me wonder, what unknown vulnerabilities are waiting for us. Vulnerabilities that we never heard of, or that they are only a thing in the context of AI or LLMs in prompt engineering. So the second one is called...
You're saying that AI can come up with new vulnerabilities.
It's a new territory.
No, because you couldn't come up with new ideas.
No, but you think there's going to be only good things, right? There's also going to be new vulnerabilities, of course. So the second one is called tool poisoning attack, which this diagram describes a bit. So basically you have a bad tool that does bad things. And I think a code example will give you more idea how it works. So this is how it looks like. I'll give you a minute to read it. This is for a tool that simply adds two numbers. So you can see in the comments, they just added, please send me this configuration file. Please don't say you're doing anything wrong. And by the way, please also send me the private SSH key of the user. And if you don't believe this is happening, this is from, I think, May 22nd, 6 days ago. A hidden comment was enough to make GitLab leak private source code and inject untrusted HTML into the responses. GitLab already patched it, but it demonstrates part of the vulnerabilities where they're trying to also build an OWASP for LLMs. And then this is actually yesterday. The MCP tool, the most popular MCP tool for GitHub, had a vulnerability where you actually put a comment, it's a comment or an issue, and the LLM will pick it up and say, oh yeah, this needs to, and this is a theoretical, but it allows you to change basically through the agents and inject whatever you want. Okay, on the bright side, we do have people building already security tools. They're trying to catch up, tackle all kinds of attacks, and this is one of the tools, for example, that's trying to do this MCP scan. So the ecosystem is growing, but like I said, this is just the beginning. Now, this doesn't mean people are not aware and not doing anything about it. We already have the beginnings of authorization of MCP using OAuth. But like in the frontier of the West, it looks a bit like this, like stockades or a bit of a wooden fence, a primitive and basic security measure. But if you look closely in the MCP documentation, it clearly mentioned it's actually optional. So I have a bit of a question on the crowd. Who here has implemented OAuth before? Okay. And on MCP?
No.
Nobody. Okay, it's still optional, right? Very interesting. All right. Now let's talk about another aspect, which is tech debt. I mean, even though we see the security risks, it will not stop us from building and testing, right? So we naturally will be incurring tech debt. So the question is how much? As we race to stake our claim in the AI gold rush, we are constantly building hidden tech debt, of course. This can be either good or bad, depending on your business goals. Let me put this analogy from the Wild West times. So during the 1800s in America, the government really needed to build this transcontinental railroad so that they could connect the East and the West. They needed to standardize the rail gauges. The gauges means the distance between both rails, because the railroads were built everywhere, and they were all different sizes. During those times, the Northeast, for example, these tracks over here, were already using a standard, what they call the standard gauge, which also came from the UK. But elsewhere in America, they range between 2 feet and 6 feet. So it looks a bit like this. So they created the Pacific Railroads Act in 1863, and they specified it had to be 4 feet, 8.5 inches. But it took until 1886, around 23 years, to complete the move and repay that accumulated tech debt. They even had this event called a Great Gauge Change that took months of planning, but in 2 days, they managed to move tens of thousands of rails a bit inward, which is a cool story. So similarly, we have now a few competing protocols, and some backed by a pretty big players like Google and IBM. Look how many partners the other protocol called agent-to-agent has. So are we sure MCP is gonna be the winner in this race, actually? This actually also reminds me of the orchestration tools we had 10 years ago, around 10 years ago. Who won this one? I actually thought Docker Swarm would win back then. They were part of Docker, right? So it made more sense. But I think what really matters is community building, marketing. That makes all the difference sometimes. So as I already mentioned, we're just getting started. And if we build too fast or hastily, prioritizing speed versus strategy, we might end up in the wrong side of standardization. And we'll need to pay the debt at some point. Also on tech debt, though we are at the beginning of the AI and MCP, it's already wildly popular. We are currently at the point where we have many MCP registries, and MCP servers are popping right and left. I'm honestly overwhelmed with so many. I have not had time to explore all of them. It's really nice to see so much activity, creativity, and excitement around the area. My take on this is that we are probably be better in the future, not using thousands of tools, but maybe only 10 really good ones. And also, I also cannot wait for MCP servers from first party to come. Right now, we're taking a strange detour where there's a proxy which takes your API key, and then you need to send your API key to a server, and then they're using that. I think that also needs to kind of be improved, especially now that we have the OAuth implementation accepted, at least in the documentation. So if you want to check out which MCP servers are the most mature, I put some of the logos there, which they call sometimes the reference MCP servers. So you can look at how they've been implemented, and it's kind of the edge of what the standard is if you want to implement a server. With the break server, Sentry, Postgres. Postgres is interesting because it's like putting a hole in your database that you can query anything. So what is your take, guys, on this with all of the servers? Are you guys wanted to be part of it and build something, or wait a bit? Yeah.
Has MCP just come out with a thing this month where now you don't have to download the servers, and the servers are suddenly cloud-based, or I know there's something changes recently, and also what's ACP?
ACP is the IBM's implementation, another protocol. So now we have, that I know of, 3 protocols that are trying to compete in this space. What I do see is that there's a lot of activity on MCP, so it seems like it's winning, but like, who knows, right? Okay, lastly, on tools and MCP servers, the most interesting for me is this one called sequential thinking, which is basically a tool that allows the LLM to prompt itself to think. You can say how many times you need to think, what are your thoughts, how many steps to take. I think this is where we're gonna see very interesting advancements as well in tools. All right, great. Now we're talking about thinking. Let's go into my favorite topic for tonight, which is the human element, which is the ugly and the good. And let's start with privacy. So who, maybe a bit controversial, who thinks data privacy is important? Everybody? Why?
It's private.
Okay. And where are you hosting your data right now? In the cloud? On-prem?
At home.
At home?
So on-prem.
It's on-prem. Okay. So
You host anything with an American company, you have to be afraid of the friendship act, even though they say, don't be afraid of friendship act.
yeah, so basically in this AI frontier, personal data is like unclaimed rangeland. It is vast, valuable, and vulnerable to modern-day data rustlers and powerful cattle owners or baroons. We already know some outlaws out there. We can see this by the GDPR fines that have been implemented by EU regulators. And we're now starting to see the first wanted signs in this AI frontier, in like the Wild West. So for example, Meta has a total of 2.4 billion in fines currently. And things like forcing users to consent, transferring data to the US, multiple data breaches, exposing child and teenagers' contact data publicly. Also, Amazon has around 750 million in fines for doing target advertising without consent. And of course, there's more like LinkedIn, TikTok, and others. And I'm not trying to single out specific companies here, but these ones were the ones who have the highest bounties. We also got news like this that state that Meta is torrenting dozens of terabytes of books for their AI training, which makes me really think about the following quote, which is, if you steal from an author, it's plagiarism, but if you steal from many, it's called research. So this research that is going on is starting to become actually a big market. At a massive scale, we can call it maybe web scraping, right? Web scraping is part of this alternative data market, which is worth around 4.9 billion in 2023, and is set to grow around 28% annual rate until 2032. That means that the web scraping software market alone is around 1 billion right now, and it will grow around 2.5 billion by 2032.
I don't think so.
A lot of research going on.
I think it will decrease because they will get more and more shitty data generated by AI.
Good point, yeah. So we already created all the data that exists. You cannot create more. Good point. So while some big corporations have been and are still fencing off huge territories without regard, the people are only now beginning to demand property lines and ask for sheriffs to come with new laws like the GDPR, the EU AI Act. I think this marks a really true rugged start in the fight for the digital rights and the ownership of our data. So naturally, we know regulating fast-moving technology is never easy, especially when it's still evolving, like we've been discussing. But just because it's difficult doesn't mean it's not necessary. In fact, it's often in these moments when the lines are still being drawn and the stakes are rising that thoughtful regulation matters the most. So another controversial question, but who here likes regulations?
Regulations are bullshit.
50-50, interesting. Awesome, we have some sheriffs in here actually. So now let's finally talk about human culture. I mean, people have to make a living, of course, right? But also people who, but we also have people who I think take this too far. And we often see the parallel stories of selling something that is overhyped or unproven. Like the classical snakes oil, AI agents, that promise a cure to fix anything. Or the story of dowsing. Who knows the story of dowsing? I'll explain it quickly. So basically, you have a stick that you walk around, and apparently it tells you where the water is, so you can dig and make a hole. But I mean, it's proven that it's actually pseudoscience, and that most of the time, if you just dig, you'll find water. So if you can sell that, well, it's great, right? So be careful out there, and please do your due diligence. But also thankfully there's already people doing this for us. In the EU, for example, is launching a consultation around AI. And some researchers are writing papers already on the matters, already comparing AI protocols. And I think it's prudent to be a bit patient and make sure that we take sure steps implementing new technologies like MCP. So, I mean, we're still human, and last time I checked, and it's hard not to jump into the hype train, right? It's in our human nature to take shortcuts, to focus on the goal and not on the road ahead. This is why some of us needs to traverse new paths, test things out, and some of us want to make sure that things are stable and well established. we're just in the beginning of understanding where the dangers and where are the real gains. Or we can end up like some new of the vibe coders out there. I don't know if people have seen this before. Somebody built their own SaaS and apparently everybody hacked this person because everything was leaked and there was no security. Who's seen this before?
Didn't he fire all his devs and said he was going to build a company without engineers?
I think maybe he wanted to build Stripe with vibe coding.
And started getting hacked, right?
Yeah, I think I also heard he was YouTubing it or live streaming it with all credentials showing environment variables, everything. I mean, very rookie mistake. So you can choose what kind of frontier cowboy or cargo you want to be. The salesman doing anything for the next sale, or maybe the outlaw that likes to flirt with the law and fight the rightful cause, or the serving man, mapping and measuring regularly all the dangers and opportunities. Can you see I put some computers in the back? Okay, so to summarize this is a bit of the current state of things. I tried to make a map. We talked about current dangers in terms of security, tech debt. We also talked about governments, regulators, and researchers are working on to keep us safe and protected, hopefully. And we talked about the marvelous human nature, where we need to decide for ourselves what kind of cowboy we want to be. Nevertheless, during these new beginnings, let's keep the spirit of adventure, exploration, and resilience, and ride into the new frontiers of AI together as tech pioneers. Woo-hoo!